Private Lender Podcast, episode 112.
The Private Lender Podcast quote of the day comes to us from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail."
This is the Private Lender Podcast, the show that shares practical advice and know-how for new and seasoned lenders, from private mortgages on single-family houses to joint ventures on commercial projects and beyond. Discover details about investment vehicles that you won't find at your local bank or online broker. Listen and learn from private lenders and real estate investors, as well as from professionals and entrepreneurs, as they share the details, strategies, and the insight that allows for successful and prosperous lending. Now, get ready to increase your ROI. Here's your host, Keith Baker.
Hello, Lender Nation. Greetings from the energy capital of the world. Last time I checked, Houston, Texas. And welcome to episode 112 of the Private Lender Podcast. I'm your host, Keith Baker, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your time with me today. If you're looking for practical tips and advice on private lending and how to build and maintain wealth without banks or Wall Street, then you're in the right place. But if you want to learn from my mistakes so that you can avoid them, well, then pull up a chair and pour yourself a stiff drink, my friend, because this podcast is just for you. Private Lender Podcast is dedicated to giving people just like you and me the knowledge and confidence to participate in the most passive form of real estate investing known to man, private lending. And if you're looking for the easy button or a shortcut to beginning your private lending, then head over to privatelenderpodcast.com/Inc. That's INK to learn how you can put your money to work for you by investing in private and hard money loans in and around the Houston area. And in case you haven't heard me say it before, Texas is a very lender-friendly state with a relatively short foreclosure period. And that's why we private lenders like lending here so much. So if you want to find out more, please go over to privatelenderpodcast.com/Inc. INK. Today, as you hear this, or as this episode is being released, it is Labor Day in the United States. To be specific, this episode is dropping on Monday, September 7th, in this dreadful year of our Lord, 2020. I noticed earlier, I'm going to kind of go off the ranch here, but I noticed earlier that the acorns had started to fall from an oak tree in my backyard, and the squirrels are beginning to hoard their stash for the winter. And it was quite fun just to watch them kind of not fight, but scurry around, and very excited about the fresh acorns that had fallen. And given the year it has been thus far, and not knowing what the next 4 months are going to bring, not that January 1 is going to suddenly make our lives any better, but recently I've adapted a mantra and motto, which are a very determined and emphatic plea to you, dear listener. And that is this: 3 simple words. Prepare for winter. That's it. Prepare for winter. It's coming. The squirrels know it. You haven't seen, something's coming. I don't know, how much crazier things can get, but I don't want to ask. So I think it's a good time to prepare for winter. Start putting those acorns back. Not spending so much. Maybe get a little more conservative in the fiscal side of things. I'm trying to do that at the same time, trying to also become more liberal on the giving and the tithing and whatnot. So they say the more you give, the more you get back. So I'm trying that myself. I'm not suggesting necessarily you do that, but just saying that's where I'm at. And yeah, we've had a hell of a nice long run on this bull market. So we'll see what happens. But okay, today's topic is one for which I receive quite a few questions, and that is how to lend beyond your own backyard. Because I always tell people to start in their backyard before they move out and lend out of town or even across state lines. And it's something that I don't do myself because I don't need to leave Texas. It's fairly secure and safe for me, and I can go still see the properties. However, today I have the privilege of speaking with Jaspreet Baveja, a private lender in the San Francisco Bay Area, who's going to talk about how he generates positive ROI through private lending on properties that are over 2,000 miles away. In fact, I owe him a big, huge debt of gratitude because I was trying to wholesale some property, some land in Central Texas last week. And it was today's guest, Jaspreet, who suggested I take down the deal myself and that he would be a private lender. Unfortunately, the deal fell through, but I'm really looking forward to the next one, knowing that I have a lender who's willing to finance development deals in a very hot spot of Texas. So all he did was ask me one simple question, and it got me out of a mental rut, and it got me out of my own way. And it gave me another option that had been kept hidden by my own limiting beliefs. So I'm very grateful he made the suggestion, and I want to say thanks. But let's go ahead and get down to the brass tacks and into the interview with Jaspreet Baveja. Lender Nation, I'm honored to have with us on the show today, Jaspreet Baveja. Jaspreet, welcome to the Private Lender Podcast.
Thank you very much. And I love the pronunciation there.
Thank you. Thank you. I did practice.
On point. on point.
So with that name, give us a quick background of, I know you live in the San Francisco area. Where's your family come from?
We came from India, born and raised in India, about almost 15 years, moved to New York for a couple of years, then down to Florida, Miami for 10 years. And I've been in the Bay Area now over 10 years as well. Met my wife here, and she was also born and raised in India, New Delhi, just like me. So yeah, we've been married almost 10 years, have 2 girls, and my parents live in Florida, but are actually here at my house visiting. In this COVID insanity, they said we waited long enough, so we want to see our grandkids. They came out, and my youngest one just had her birthday yesterday, and the older one's going to have a birthday in a month from now. So they're just spending the time.
Nice. That's one of the things that I think most Americans, or certainly my American family, didn't understand, was the concept of family is a lot different with Indians. So it's not better, not worse. But look, an old Indian grandmother trying to feed you when you're full and don't want to eat is the same as my grandmother, which was trying to feed me. The same thing. But the reason I brought, Jaspreet knows why he's on, but the reason I wanted to bring him on today for you, Lender Nation, is I always say I only talk about things that I do. And I lend in Texas and in my backyard, but Jaspreet goes across state lines. And so I wanted to bring him on and just really turn the show over to you, Jaspreet, and say, how did you get into this private lending thing? And you do it more for cash flow, whereas I do it for my retirement. You're doing it on a cash flow basis. So I found your story very intriguing. Obviously, we've spoken a few times, and you're graciously kind enough to come on the show. So I'm going to shut up and start taking notes here in a minute. So if you could just, how did you become a private lender? Or what? Were you a wholesaler or a rehabber? Walk us through how you got to that.
Well, I was working a full-time job at a healthcare company, and I had been at that healthcare company at least 6 years when I got started in real estate. And I had a rental property out here that just became a rental because we moved out of a condo, and we said, oh, well, we can rent it out for the same amount of money that we have to pay our lender. So that's all that mattered. A net zero was all I was looking for, because I was not an investor, not in that mindset at all. It was just, well, I can have 2 properties for the price of one and just leave it there and it'll pay for itself and that'll be great. Never worked out that easily. But anyways.
Sounded good on paper, right?
Yeah, it sounded great on paper. But luckily enough, it appreciated enough that we were able to get out of it for net zero at the end, even after 6+ months of no rent from a tenant in California. That's normal. Evictions process 6 to 9 months. That's like, nobody even blinks an eye on that one. So yeah, it's insane. And so I said, okay, I'll never do that again. Well, lo and behold, 2 years later, I did it again. This time the rent was like time and a half of what it was before, but amazing tenants. They were making more in retirement than I was making with my wife's income combined as active employees. And I was like, all right, yeah, I think I can trust these guys. They're pretty savvy, and it worked out well, and I appreciated it again. And that one appreciated probably almost 50% in the 3 to 5 years that we held it. And that was one of the biggest boosts for cash influx to our family, to say, all right, gives us a little bit of a nest egg to go ahead and do what I did, was quit my job, actually. And so in 2017, let's say I got started in real estate. My friend said, hey, look, you already got this one rental property in the Bay Area. Forget all that. That's not cash flow at all. But let's look at cash flowing markets. And they dragged me over to Indianapolis from the Bay Area, and sight unseen, without flying out there ever, bought 2 duplexes and relied on a network that my friends and investor buddies had already built. So got the broker, got, handyman, GCs, electrician guy, and a flooring guy, and slowly started building the network, and a property manager. And yeah, soon enough, went to fired the property manager, got another one. Soon thereafter, went to fired them.
You mean you have to manage the property manager?
Oh, yeah. What a concept, right? Like, buddy, what are you talking about? You get a property out of state, you give it to a property manager, they hire everybody they need to. You make 8, 10, 12% a year, and everything goes happy-go-lucky. What are you talking about? Nothing ever goes wrong. Yeah, you get a check in the mail. Boom, mailbox money. Ideal. But no, it doesn't always work that way, unfortunately.
So you got the mail. You got to manage the managers, and you get the easy mailbox money. So your bumps and bruises your friend, was he on the ground there in Indianapolis?
No, I mean, so he was here, and he actually probably still has about 60+ units out there in Indy. So they're just powering through. I mean, it's just, I think the scale matters, right? Like the more invested you are and the more scale you have, the easier it is to handle those bumps and bruises, because let's say even 50% of your portfolio goes away and you still got 40 paying tenants. It's a lot easier to manage those other 20, 30, 40 that are not, and get them rented and get them managed and all that stuff. So I think that's where scale comes in. But I was barely at 2 or 4 duplexes. And during this process of building my portfolio up is when I started networking with wholesalers and property managers, like I said, and other flippers, other out-of-state investors that were investing in Indy out of California, whether SoCal, NorCal, whatever, and just talking to people. And one of the investors said, hey, would you mind lending me money to buy this property in Indy? And I'll pay you X% interest rate and you'll just be the first position lien. I said, wow, that percentage. I heard about that percentage return when I first was buying properties. Haven't seen it in the last 18 months that I've been holding them. Maybe this will work out better. And so that's how I started the process, and just did some research, talked to a lawyer, looked at the contracts and note and mortgage, understood, oh, well, this is pretty similar to what my bank gave me when I was buying the property, and they were giving me the loan, and the documents look pretty similar. And, figured out what it takes to vet them. But I don't think I spent months in trying to figure that out. It was more like 2 weeks from when they asked me, I was said, yes, let's go ahead and get started. And the third weekend, I'd already funded the deal, and it was close to $250,000. But it was still something that I was comfortable taking the risk on because of that first position lien, equity in the deal. The property was probably worth $500,000, and they were buying it for $290 or $300. And I said, all right, well, there's enough equity that if everything goes south, I should be able to recoup my investment and still be able to make money. So took that risk, and it paid off pretty well. And that was probably like June 2018. And by the end of 2018, I had done like 6 more. And not even with that same guy, different people, just word of mouth. Literally never advertised, never said it to anything, and just talked about how I've done it. And people came up and just asked, I vetted them, and off it went.
I want to unpack a few things there, if you don't mind. First off, you said, you had a house in California, appreciate 50%. God bless the California real estate market, because when it's good for people, it's good. And when it sucks, it sucks. So yeah, that's great that you were able to take advantage of that. And then I also love the fact that, and I wouldn't call it speculation per se, but like an outsider looking into California would probably consider speculation. You were able to profit and then put it into something very conservative like private lending, which I think is great. You should always have some spec money. You always have a little blackjack money, little roulette money. Something for the craps table, just a little, just to have a little fun, or for the stock market, if that's your casino, whatever. But I do like that. The other thing I wanted to ask is what was the term of that first note within 3 weeks that you had funded $250,000?
I think it was a 6-month or maybe a 12-month loan. And it was going to be a personal guarantee to an LLC that had existed for a while. And they were just going to buy it. And I think they were going to wholesale this one. They were just going to buy it at a discount and then put maybe $1,000 to $5,000 in just to clean it up and presentable, not do a full-blown flip, but presentable, and then market it. And I think they have their own brokerage too. So it's a pretty well-established team of investors. They got wholesaling, flipping, buy and hold, all that under their umbrella. And they've got all these different components of their business that they utilize. So it was pretty easy to figure out. Yeah, they've done a lot of deals. Yeah, they are open in the market. They have a huge podcast following. They have a huge investor following. And so it was a lot easier to lend to an established entity at terms of 6 to 12 months at double-digit returns with a first position lien guarantee, knowing that your money is secured in that asset.
And you just touched on one of my favorite things when lending to people. I say, who do I lend to? Who do I lend to? I always tell people to be extremely discriminatory in this case. Not from any of the protected classes, but I want to see a lot of gray hair. I like to see age when I lend to people that have been through it, that people are like, oh, this reminds me of the savings and loan crash of 88, or this is when this turned. I love that. And the other thing I like is always required people have skin in the game, which usually means money in the deal. But there's also a reputational risk. And so I've turned a lot of newbies away and first timers away. However, if they have a coach or a mentor that is earning, or their shingle is out and they have students and they have a reputation risk, there's a reputational risk. I like those too. And so it sounds like you said, with this team that they've been around long enough it wasn't like, your friend's cousin Jimmy found a flip, right? Like this is a business deal.
Yeah, legitimate business that I've been operating for years. And even on my website, I did the same thing. I put a link to one of the biggest counties in Indiana. is Marion County. And I put the Marion County's online website on my website that says, all right, you click here, you put in any entity's name or a person's name, and you will see mortgage, release of mortgage, mortgage, release of mortgage. And you see those deeds going in their name or the entity's name going back years. And when you see 100 plus of those transactions, you know that they're active in the market and you know how long they've been active. And you can see the addresses, you can see dollar amounts, right? So it's a free, simple resource to do a background check. And you just know, hey, you can't go wrong. This is literally the county's website. This is a recorded deed that they can't lie about.
Right. No, it's public record. Recorded at the county clerk. Yeah.
And you go straight to the horse's mouth to hear, yep, they've done this deal, they've done this deal, they've done this deal. And you just go down the list and it's just 100 plus of them.
Now, how quick does that comfort level, that warm and fuzzy just, right?
Just overtakes you and you're like, oh man, this is pretty good. And then, you get their LLC. You can just go to the statement information on the website, the state's registrar website, and you go take a look and say, all right, well, they've been there. They've registered, 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever. And they've done hundreds of deals and they've got all these people investing. Clearly, they're doing something right.
And you also touched on something that is a deal breaker. If a lot of people want to have the loan to the LLC so that if it goes tits up, they can walk away. They just close down the LLC and there's no personal liability. Not in my world. And it doesn't sound like that happens in your world either. So you get the personal guarantee for everybody listed on that LLC.
Yep.
All right. Excellent. And I know a couple of lawyers that insist, like if not for LLCs, because that's a different entity or a different thing together. But when you loan to an individual, especially like in Texas, you put their name of their wife as well, because we're community property. So they could make the argument, well, no, only half that loan. So if I loan out $100,000, well, only 50 of it is tied to him. Well, no. So then, all right, okay, Mrs. Smith or whatever.
All right. Now, I have never lent to a person's name ever. And I have been involved with at least 60 of my own loans so far. And I've helped get about 40 or more other people's loans into place, just help connect the dots. And not once has it been in a person's name. It's always been in an entity name, and the entity has to have existed for a while, seasoned guys, and that's it.
Good. I like that. That's how you stay safe. And your background is not in money or finance, is it? You said you worked for a healthcare company.
Yeah, I was doing healthcare regulatory compliance. I was doing documentation for physicians and surgeons and matching the dots for state regulations and doing data analytics, but it was never around finance and dollars and liens and figuring out mortgages, none of that. The only time I'd ever dealt with a mortgage was when I was buying my own primary residences, and that's it. And that speculative money that you're talking about, right? Like it was just a primary residence that I got for my family. We moved in, and a couple of years later, we said, all right, well, family's growing. Feel like this is too small. Let's go to a different house and we'll just rent this one out. And that's how it happened. But luckily enough, stayed in it for at least 2 out of the 5 years. So tax-free.
Tax-free, yeah.
That money and run.
This is also another interesting point, is that this is not in your retirement account. So this is cash money out in front. So is it ordinary income? Is it taxed as ordinary income for you?
Yeah. Now I've just switched over to having an S Corp election. So we'll see, dividends and salary and self-employment tax and all that stuff. We'll see how that works out this year. But it was just basically I did it out of my own name for the first 20 deals at least. It was just my name lending to an LLC. And then I eventually set up the LLC. And then I said, all right, well, maybe the LLC's hit its quota. Let's go over to an S Corp. And you grow. There's no need to have everything ready day one and everything figured out day one. I think a lot of people get held back in this scenario of, well, I want to have all my ducks in a row. Well, I think you should focus on the deal and the stability and the verification of that asset, the person, the entity, whoever your borrower is, or even if you're doing a flip, focus on the market and the analysis of that and worry about your entities when you have enough experience to justify and warrant spending the money and figuring out and adding that headache to yourself. If you can at least do one deal on your own, well, you'll know what kind of expenses you had. You'll know what kind of timeline it took. You'll know what kind of people you have on the ground. Because if you spend too much time worrying about the entities, you're never going to move forward and actually do the deal and learn what you need to actually keep your money safe versus just anticipating somebody suing you in the future and asset protection and tax efficiencies that you may gain. We'll figure out how to earn the money first, and then you'll figure out the tax efficiencies later.
I'm following that very path myself right now. Is Larry Gowen said it once. I mean, I took one of his boot camps, and I still have the 3-ring binder with the first real estate course I ever bought from him. But one of his boot camps, when he came to Houston, this lady stood up and said, "When should I start to make my project file?" And this is obviously several years ago, before, when we actually had manila envelope file folders and everything. And Larry goes, "Wait, have you closed on the deal? Have you?" And she's like, "No. I just." And he's like, "Well, find a property, find a seller, do all of this, and then worry about creating your file." And someone's like, "Well, when should I create, my LLC?" He's like, "Well, look, if you do your due diligence, if you do all your paperwork and you disclose everything, personally, you're not going to have any more liability. Now you start getting rental properties, you start doing 5 wholesale deals, 5 flips, right? You've got moving parts now. Now's the time to start looking at that umbrella, right? And that the liability and asset protection and everything else. I like that. Yeah, go make some money before you figure out. That's like saying, well, what tax accountant should I get? I want to pay the fewer taxes. Go make some money, and then
yeah, exactly. We'll figure out the taxes later. It baffles me the number of people I hear talk about, well, before I get started on my deal, and right then I just all of a sudden, why? Figure out how to make the money first. Get that process started. Get that wheel churning. And then take money out of that deal and go get an LLC set up. You can always do a quick claim deed later. You can always set up land contracts later. Sure, you may lose a little bit of that anonymity, and you may have a little bit of exposure for maybe months or weeks or even a year plus, but get property insurance, get umbrella insurance. You can protect yourself in so many other ways than just worrying about entity creation and figuring out the right accountant and the right strategies. And I think it's all about just get the experience under your belt, figure out some way to make money, and then use that money from that cash flowing business you're setting up and go get everything set up.
I like that a lot. So you had a nightmare deal. Everyone's had at least one nightmare deal. So tell me one that you're willing to admit, because, you're going to close the door so your wife can't hear. But
No, actually, of the 100+ transactions that I've been involved with, not one has gone into default even once. And one came sort of close. And that was one of the only 2 transactions I've done in California. One is still going strong. The other one was this one. And I think that you and I have talked about this one before where, well, just set up a secondary lien on the property and secure your investment that way versus putting everything into a note and having it signed. So it was where I had a personal guarantee from not only the entity principals, but also a third party that had brought the deal to me. So I had them sign a personal guarantee with their wife's name on it that said, if this deal goes south for whatever reason on this date, they will pay me my principal plus interest due and fees and whatever else. And I will assign the note to them and they can do whatever they want with it. Well, that day came and I said, hey, I'm not seeing the money coming from these guys. I'm not hearing anything from them that gives me the confidence. I need to invoke this right here. And 21 days later, the check was in my hand, certified check, cashed, and out the deal I went and said, all right, well, hey, it's not like the deal went south because the deal was a package to me. It was a transaction where I had multiple layers of protection and I just invoked the protection layer. And within 3 weeks, I was good to go and walked away. So, I think it's all about protecting yourself and anticipating what could possibly go wrong and just do the best you can in setting up your terms the right way. Because like it says right behind you, right? My money, my terms. And if they want that money, they're going to agree to my terms. And they sure did. And lo and behold, I walked away scot-free, be it a couple of weeks later, but it's still, it's just, I don't have to worry about the hassle of them putting the property on the market and dealing with inspections and delays and closing and all that. Fine, you go handle that all day, whatever you need. But I've got this third party securing my money. So return of investment plus return on investment was achieved through the proper channels of setting up your terms right.
So obviously, this was a private loan to somebody. Was it a rehab or a rental rehab in California?
Yeah, it was a rehab. It was a commercial property. It was a commercial warehouse property here in California and on one of the huge crossroads in California, which is for interstate transport. And they were going to do warehouse and set up those gates for the trucks and all that, ramps and all that stuff. And it was a great property. I mean, if they fix it up right, it's worth a lot. And they bought it super cheap for literally 50% or 48%, loan to or 48% of the value of the ARV. So it was an amazing deal, an amazing amount of equity. So I had equity backup, I had personal guarantees, I had the loan, the note, the mortgage, the deed, the lien. Like I just went down and said, all right, what boxes can I check in California to protect myself? Check. All right, let's do it.
Okay. So deed of trust, you had property insurance, you had good equity.
Yep.
Where did they run into trouble? Where did the borrower, the operator, did they communicate that with you in real time?
And not so well. I was trying my best to give them the benefit of the doubt, even went to go see them a couple of times, and they were making some progress, but not enough. And this was one of the only times I've done 100% of the purchase price plus some rehab money, because even then I was barely touching 50% of ARV, and I had all this protection built in, and the rate of return was going to be amazing. So it was their lack of skin in the game, I think, that led to this complacency and, it's all right. It's all his money anyway. So whoopity frickin' do, we'll get to that property when we get to it. And I think that's why everybody says, right, like skin in the game is super important. But luckily enough, and I will say that I was lucky, that I was able to not have them put enough skin in the game, yet still walk away scot-free just by leveraging, the level of security that I had in there.
Okay. So that's it's too easy to walk away when your money, when it doesn't hurt you, it's too easy for them to walk away. Yeah. And the same thing, I always put I just submitted an article for a newsletter. Hope it gets published, but it basically, there are two ways that I like to protect money. And it's like, I just hit 30,000 foot, because I only had like 300 words, but processes. So your due diligence, how you do all that, those things, and your paperwork, right? The personal guarantee for all principals in an LLC, for example. And then you have the insurance policies, right? You have the title policy, the hazard policy. I always ensure that and usually in Texas, hazard and liability go together on a property. So that's put together. But I do require flood insurance, which is separate, because if $500 is going to kill a deal, they don't need my money, the way I look at it. So, but anyway, yeah, that's what I love about private lending, because I jumped in March in the stock market, and I'm like, hell yeah, man, this is like going down the river, the rapids with a tube. This is fun. But I know a lot of people lost and swallowed, but there was no insurance policies for COVID or pandemic insurance or anything like that on the market. You just had to know how to play it. And I'm no genius, I'm no timer, but so far so good. Which the more I make, the more I can lend out. That's the way I look at it. So
yeah, that's what my dad was actually just going over this morning while he's here. He's like, oh, so March 19th, I opened a trading account. I'm like, well, all right. There was no better day than that one, literally right there. So he's like, and I'm doing exceptionally. I'm like, yeah, once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm glad you're availing it. I'm not in the stock market at all. I think I have one IRA account that's stuck in Merrill Lynch that I've a couple of $1,000, literally a couple of thousand, and that's all I play with. That's my play money.
No, when I left the W-2, my last job, it was funny because I actually got a contribution into the 401k from last year, but I got it in April. And so I was mad because I thought I emptied the account because I hadn't transferred it over to my self-directed IRA yet. I was like, all right, not the notary, but the diamond signature, it's a whole pain in the, anyway. So I just, I was keeping it there until a deal came along, then I'd roll it over or whatever. And a buddy of mine texted me. His financial advisor is a guy we went to high school with. And he texted me. He's like, hey, just look at this. And he just took a photo of his email. And he's like, just all the stocks, it was Boeing, United, everything was taking a hit, right? So yeah, I jumped into some Amazon. I'm really proud about that one, or lucky. But that, to me, it was pure speculation. And it was more than I would normally push in. However, I got that warm and fuzzy started coming up a little bit when nothing was truly wrong with the economy before February. Outside of normal cycles, right? Like there's no impending housing crisis or mortgage crisis.
Debatable.
Well, yeah, but not like in 08. Not like in 08. I mean, we're certainly heading, we could make arguments for, but yeah, I mean.
Well, I'm not going to get into that.
It's not on the horizon like it was 07, 08. So I was like, why not? Yeah, I'll put it in. And then I interviewed, I'm drawing a complete blank, but I was on a multifamily apartment investing. God, what was his name? I'm just killing me. Anyway, he went straight to trading the S&P options, right? So, when I was up 30%, he was up 5X because he's playing options.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel horrible. Was it Jim Mafucci? I can't even, I feel, this is what happens once you hit your 40s, people. But anyway.
Not there yet, so.
Yeah, God bless you. But yeah, but I was sitting there thinking, I was like, yeah, I did all great. I did really good with my speculation. He's like, I'm up 5X. I'm like, okay.
All right, well, I'm just going to shut up and drink my water here. Thanks.
Off topic a little bit. How is COVID in the Bay Area right now, man?
Pretty horrible. I think California is like the number one or number two state with the most number of cases in the US overall, period.
I thought that was trending down. I thought Texas and Florida were taking that over.
Florida is the one that just I heard this morning is flattening out.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah. And, California is I think California is still number one. And this is July 31st, 2020, people that we're talking. And it's pretty bad. We go out for grocery shopping and there are masks and sanitizing every 2 minutes if we can, and making sure everything is safe and keep the kids home pretty much all the time. And I've got 2 elementary school kids, so it's quite hard, but we're just trying to do best we can.
Our school starts in 20 days and it's going to start online.
Yeah, same here. Fully online, 100%. Not in Indy, though. Indianapolis is going to be full in school.
Are they?
Yeah.
They didn't have the infiltration or the infection rate, did they?
Not the insane rate that we have now.
Okay, yeah.
But they're still there.
Back in May, I do some travel for the day job. And of course, I had to fly, connect, no direct flights. So I get to Pittsburgh and I wake up in the morning and I call Robin Mead, my travel mistress. She's always there with me when I'm on the road. I just put on CNN headline news because she could tell me the world is ending. I'd be like, oh, that's nice. That's okay. That's fine. But of course, she's like, in Texas. And the first thing they do is show a bar in Houston and it's just packed with people. And then they go over to the hill country and then there's a bunch of rivers, people going tubing. And it's just full on packed, bumper to bumper people. It's comical to me because nobody knows what the hell. I just, at this point, I'm like, let's just go through it. And I want my kids back in schools more for their sanity than mine. I think kids are resilient for the most part. But like my little one, she's 10. She said, she misses her friends. Because, some of her friends, like they come over and they hang out here and there. Other friends are like, no, we're shutting down. And I respect that. That's fine. But I didn't mean to make this a whole COVID thing. But I just figured, hey, West Coast, I'm on the Gulf Coast. What's it like? Because San Francisco is my favorite American city, hands down, that I've ever. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time there.
A lot of people are dying to get out of here and are getting out of here.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of them come to hill country of Texas. And I just heard today, Joe Rogan is moving to Texas. He was on his podcast. He didn't put it out, where exactly, but I know I have a lot of realtor friends that their parents are realtors in like rural areas of Texas. Their business is booming right now. And even a small house with some acreage is just bam going up. So I imagine it's a lot like that around anywhere there's a major metropolis, which is good for us though, as well. But in all seriousness, as an investor, and an insurance adjuster, I'm a vulture. So if a lot of people moved out of San Francisco and it became reasonable to purchase property there, which I don't think it ever will, but if it dropped 25%, I'd be in a heartbeat. I'd get in.
It has done that in certain spots.
Yeah.
It has done that in the certain spots before.
You're my boots on the ground now. You've heard it now here first, but
sounds good. But as long as I'm here, I will be your boots on the ground. No problem.
Thank you. I want a place near Haight-Ashbury. I'm a big hippie lover. Grateful Dead, the Warlocks. Love me some City Lights. In fact, there it is. Hal, if you love City Lights books, man, it's my favorite bookstore in the world. Yeah, me and Larry Ferlinghelli went way back, man, back in the 50s.
Clearly, because you're in your 40s, so the 50s
exactly,
makes sense.
Yeah, see how I did that? Well, cool. Hey, well, let me ask you this, man. If I want to get into lending out of state, right? So, your friend had already kind of set up that network and had that team built. Now, once you got into it, you've had to churn your team, and as anybody would have to. So are you strictly lending, or are you purchasing other rental properties?
So I sold all 4 of my duplexes last year, flipped them all basically is what I ended up doing, and delivered. I think all of them were delivered vacant, and I enjoyed that appreciation game and made out on all of them. And last year I tried to flip in Austin, of all places, and that went horribly wrong. But that's just all about the team, right? Like I didn't have a team as good as I have in Indy out in Austin or anywhere near it. And it just went horribly wrong. So it speaks volumes to having the right team. But doing that churn in Indy, it helped me get, I went through a few handymen, a couple of GCs, but the one constant I always had is my broker. I can't just express how important it is to have the right broker on your team, because if you're not worried about getting appraisals done on every deal. I've never done a single appraisal on any of these 100 plus transactions, not once. I rely on BPOs because those BPOs are an unbiased third party who gets a look at the exact photos, videos, can even do a tour for you if you want. And that broker's opinion is reliant on the property as is, where is in today's market. right? So they give you actual property value. So that is super key, because if you're not getting a full-blown appraisal and I'm paying 400, $500 for each one of those, which I don't, then having that BPO for whatever price you pay for it is way cheaper, but you keep that broker busy, rapport is building, and you use them to sometimes buy properties off the MLS while they're working for you. And I've done flips. So I started 3 flips this year in Indy, sold one of them, just massive returns. I don't even want to say the numbers out loud because it's just unreplicatable for me. And the second one came about and I said, hey, if I want to be a full-time real estate professional for the IRS, I need to have properties in my name, don't I? Crap. All right. Well, this flip that I'm doing is now a rental. It's perfect. And so my GC that I found through a network of mine. So we were talking about the churn of the team. As part of this private lending stuff, I helped set up a loan for a new guy. And I talked to him, then talked to somebody else I knew, connected the dots. Loan went really well, and the lender ended up making more money than they thought because of the way the terms were set up, and they prepaid a little bit. So it was exceptional returns for them. And through that process, that guy talks to me and I said, hey, look, man, I've got this one property that I just can't get anybody to go out and finish this work. He's like, oh, well, I do like 30 properties a year at least. So I've got a couple of guys that are not doing anything. Let me go put them on your property. And, he sent a couple of guys over. 2 weeks later, the work was finished and property was listed. And I said, wow, this is amazing. So you leverage your network. And that's why I don't approach anyone with a predatory sense. You never want to approach your borrowers with this, well, I'm going to juice you for everything you got, and I'm going to make sure that I put every little penny pinching thing in there and make you pay for every little thing and make sure you're going to pay me for early. If you pay me off early fees and extension fees and this penalty and that fees, like the more you tack on and the more negative you make it for them, even if they do that one deal with you because there's enough meat on the bones, doesn't mean that they're going to come back to you for the second and the third or the fourth. So building a good relationship is super key. And through that relationship, I found a GC that he said, hey, I've got another GC team. If you want to do another one, then, he's really good, and brought them on. And I said, wow, like this guy really delivered on the pricing, the timeline, the quality. It was all great and ended up doing really well. So I keep putting them to work, but I've got one property that I just rented out. Tomorrow, the tenant's going to move in, my first tenant in over a year and a half. Let's see how that goes.
Wow. All right. Hopefully you vetted them well.
I did. I tried my best. And, I'm going to self-manage it. But I've got my broker, boots on the ground. I've got handyman, GC, whatever it needs. I've got a brand new AC, brand new electrical, brand new furnace. And, like everything is done right from the get-go. It's a lot easier to bring that in and vet them right and then start the process. And hopefully it goes well. But yeah, so to your point, I've got flips, lending. I am a limited partner in at least 6 syndications, and those are multifamily in Texas, an office space for Northrop Grumman, right next to the Air Force Base in Colorado, right next to where they're making the Space Force. And so that can't go wrong, hopefully. And I've got a property in California, Northern California. I've got a deal in Southern California. And this self-storage conversion from a warehouse up in Ohio. So I've just got my money in all these different places using all these different platforms like CrowdStreet, just personal networks and lending. And so I'm just trying to leverage all the cash that I built up into creating multiple passive income streams so that I can focus on what I love doing best, which is spending time with my family and traveling, which whenever the hell that opens up again.
Well, you're getting lots of one and not so much of the other.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to get all this family time and not be able to expend energy that they have cooped up in the home. But like last year alone, we traveled 9 countries. I quit my job in May, and by the second week of June, we were in England and picked up a car and drove down from England straight across the ferry and into France, took a turn, went into Belgium, Luxembourg, Switzerland, back into France, did the whole French Riviera, Nice, Monte Carlo, Monaco, went into Spain, did all the Alicante, the whole Spanish coastline, and went into Portugal, and then did that whole boat rides into caves and beaches, and then went back into Spain and Madrid, and went to see some amazing architecture everywhere, Barcelona, Madrid, you name it, just amazing, right? Centuries old buildings and architecture and all that stuff. And it was amazing. I mean, driving through 7 countries in Europe with your kids, and a vast majority of that was back roads. And not once did I have to think about work. Did I have to think about doing some crazy stuff? I still had a deal in Austin going. I sold that property while I was international. I did 2 private loans that I remember. I was flipping a property in India at the same time and getting electrical set up from scratch. But I could do all that on WhatsApp, or wiring money is as easy as an app anywhere in the world. So it's just that flexibility is so worth it to say, yep, I'm just going to give up that job. I had all this stuff going on, right? So I said, this is the one thing that's going to go, is the job that I'm not satisfied in and not happy with and not want to do for the rest of my life, and took this on. And it's really been bliss, truly.
That's great. You're doing it right, man. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to say it. I mean, winner, chicken dinner. I mean, that's it right there. And thank you for reaching out and connecting with me. Our conversations, I enjoyed hearing it, and especially hearing about the limited partnerships and moving on in some of the crowdfunding platforms. But I just want to circle back real quick before I forget, because I do have adult ADD or ADHD, whatever it is, squirrel. But your broker is your keystone, your linchpin of your operation in Indianapolis, right? So that's where you're doing all your lending is in
all my
Indy?
lending is in Indianapolis.
Okay. Yeah. So in your other deals, like your syndications and whatnot, that's different. That's a different episode. But I participated in my first LP